So, welcome everybody. We will start. Normally we should be 30 journalists today, but we will see if they come. Maybe we are a bit too early for them, I don't know. So my name is Isabel Hoberg. I'm the director of the Residence Palace International Press Center here. Welcome. We are here at the second Residence Palace talk for journalists today on the theme of transversality in the media, of cross-disciplinarity. We'll see how we will call it later. Before entering in this issue, just some words for the journalists who weren't there 3 weeks ago for the launch of those Residence Palace talks. So the talks for journalists are an initiative of the Residence Palace International Press Center in co-creation with Belgian, European and International Association of Journalists and Federation of Journalists, as well as the Regional Information Center for Western Europe of the United Nations and the Belgian Federal Institute for Sustainable Development in co-creation with journalists. The talks for journalists are roundtable discussions for you, journalists and news editors, in the context of climate emergency and the overstepping of several planetary boundaries. Our intention is to give you more tools to deal with misinformation and greenwashing, as well as with the sometimes highly technical issues linked to the climate crisis, which affect, as you probably know, all spheres of our society: finance, industry, agriculture, mobility, education, employment, energy, culture, etc., etc. So these meetings are created for you and are dedicated to you. If you would like certain topics to be discussed or organized, please let us know. There is a sheet of paper at the entrance of the restaurant. Feel free to give us your suggestions so that we can organize it for you. We wanted to give this exchange an intimate character, a conversation between experts and journalists. The experts' introduction will be recorded by the camera who is there, but not the discussions that follow. We will leave a maximum of 10 minutes or 15 minutes to the speakers as an introduction, and then leave the floor open for discussions. Please feel free to add the two speakers' presentation with feedback from your own experience, a situation you may have encountered in your own media, for example. Today we will finish the talk at 10 o'clock, as Jean-Marc Jancovici has a train just afterwards. The contact details of the speakers will appear on this screen at 10 o'clock, so that you can contact them later if you would need to. Don't forget the breakfast at the back. It's all yours. Please help yourself. And between partner to finish, we have planned to a rotating system of governance, with each partner taking care of the organization of a meeting in turn. Today's meeting has been organized by us, the Residence Palace International Press Center. I will now give the floor to the moderator, Tim Dawson. Tim Dawson is the Deputy General Secretary of the International Federation of Journalists. I wish you a rewarding morning. Thank you.
Good morning. It's fantastic to see you all here. And just on a very minor personal note, it's really good to see the number of bicycle helmets that you've all brought with you, suggesting that you travelled here by the same means that I did. I guess the developing crisis in the world's climate is evident from all sorts of stories, be it the failure of crops in Spain, or flooding in Europe, or the extraordinary storms that we've seen in the United States in recent times. And I guess the question for all of us as journalists is, are we doing enough? Are we reporting this in a way that is compelling, interesting, and drawing people's concern to the scale of the change that's happening and the response that is necessary if we are to have any hope to address that? And I guess that's the subject that we're hoping to deal with today. I'll ask Jean-Marc Jancovici to start. He's the founder of the Carbone consultancy and the Shift think tank, and a long-time commentator on the climate crisis and a critic, I would say, of the way in which it's been reported. So if you open up, and then we'll take Marianne and then open it to the floor.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I hope the mic. Actually, the topic that I have chosen for this introduction, brief introduction, follows an initiative that was set up almost 20 years ago. And it led me to meet Jérôme there. That was called Les Entretiens de Combloux. The idea was then to bring journalists in the winter, far from Paris, otherwise they would run after 1 hour and leave the place, in order to explain to them how energy and climate issues are intricated to everything we do, everywhere, all the time. Why is it so? It's just because actually when we talk about the environment, we talk about the planet that we live on, and all the human systems are part of the physical system of the planet Earth and what surrounds it. So basically, when you look at our economic system, you look, for example, at physical flows that allow to extract, transform, and distribute. When you look at our social system, you look at a way to redistribute the production that we have thanks to natural resources, energy, and partially our work. So basically, the human system, the human society that we live in, or the human societies, because there are plenty of them, are part of a larger system, which is the biophysical system, and the economy is just a fraction of the biophysical system that we live in. Whereas when we discuss with our conventional ways of seeing things, it's the exact opposite. For example, in the economic sector that I know by heart because that's where I work, environment issues are seen as a fraction of the economy. You see, it's what we call externalities in the economic sector. And so my point is that today it is difficult for people, and it is difficult for the press, to reconcile the two, which is to bring physical items into the treatment of any information in any sector. So let me give you an example. Today, the fact that our purchasing power has increased is the direct consequence of the increase of the energy available per capita. It is just a direct consequence of that. Because if we have more, it means that we have produced more. If we have produced more, it means that we have transformed more natural resources. And in the physical world, transformation is energy. Actually, energy is by definition in physics what allows to quantify change. So basically, the more we manufacture anything, the more energy we use. And the more energy we use, by definition, the more we transform our environment. So it is impossible today to consume more, to increase our purchasing power, without, in real terms, without increasing the energy consumption. This is something that I have never seen, or almost never seen, in the economic pages of papers. It is impossible today, it has been impossible historically, to increase pensions, long studies, and decrease the work time without increasing the energy per capita. This is something that I have never seen in the treatment in the treatment of the information in the economic pages. It is very difficult to keep the present level of globalization and the economic benefits that we have derived from it, namely the fact that you have the clothes that you have, and you eat the food that you eat, and you have the glasses that you have, etc., because all that needs globalization today to be manufactured without plenty of energy, etc., etc. So, and another example, it would be impossible today, or it was impossible rather in the past, to develop sedentary civilizations without a stable climate. It's because the climate has been remarkably stable for the last 10,000 years that humans human settled, and developed agriculture. So the idea, and the same person who is going to receive the information is going today to receive information from different journalists that all have their point of view, which is consistent in their own sector, or which seems consistent in their own sector. And actually, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, they don't realize that it's inconsistent with what has been previously said or what will be said afterwards by another journalist discussing another topic. Again, an example. I often watch the evening news on the first French TV network because it is something that, for me, is a good image of what the society is in France, TF1. And you can see at 15 minutes after the beginning of the news an item on the environment, and 10 minutes later an item, for example, on tourism. And actually, what is said during the item on tourism is, when you look thoroughly, exactly the opposite of what has been said 10 minutes before. When people say it's a pity that the economy is in recession, actually they say exactly the opposite, that when they say we should decrease our material consumption. Because basically, if we decrease our material consumption, we put the economy in recession, in physical terms. So today, one of the difficulties that we have with the way the information is created and spread in the papers, in the news, one of the difficulties is to reconcile things that actually are not possible one with the other. That's one of the difficulties. And this has an effect, a first-order effect, on politicians, because they are very, very reactive to what you say, and that seldom think better than the population in general. I mean, they are so in a government. It's like the exact the same difficulty that in a paper, which is creating something which is consistent from beginning to end, and there is a link between what is said in the news and what is discussed in political organs at large. So that was the idea that I wanted to bring to you, which is how in the press it is possible not necessarily to be consistent, but to explicitly say to the people that read or hear you when you are not. Saying what I'm saying right now, please be aware of the fact that it is not compatible with this point of view that is developed. And a last point, which also brings inconsistency, of course, is ads, which sometimes send a message which is the exact opposite of what has been said previously, I would say, in the non-paid for part of the paper or the radio news. And that's about it for the introductory part.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, so the media is inconsistent.
Not always. They can be.
Marianne, perhaps you can give us a perspective from a working journalist. Marianne Gross works for Politico Europe, previously for Euromoney in the UK, and you are a sustainability reporter, so
right.
Perhaps you can shed some light on how it is that we can be worrying about the environment in one story and promoting holidays in exotic places in the next.
Yes, and I am sometimes inconsistent for sure. So I am part of a 3-people team covering sustainability at Politico Europe. We don't cover climate. I think that's an important notification to give. The climate and energy team is a separate entity. So already we've split those 2 poles within Politico. I cover the circular economy specifically, so anything related to waste management and resource inefficiency, and greenwashing to a certain extent. And before joining Politico, I was writing about sustainable finance, climate finance, and ESG. And so essentially, I sort of stopped speaking to bankers and started speaking with a lot of bureaucrats. But in both cases, it's people who I think are very capable of utilizing the global attention given to climate change to promote and protect their own interests. And it's this switch from covering the financial markets to covering politics that allows me to think a little bit more critically about how to cover climate change and environmental issues in a multidisciplinary way, because I don't think that we look at the very intimate relationship between the financial markets and the politics sector enough as reporters, even though that intimate relationship very much dictates the speed and direction that our global transition towards a sustainable economic model is taking. And I think if there's one message that I want to give out today is that it will only work if reporters are told to treat climate change and environmental issues as the context of the story rather than the story itself. So a little bit about how we try and do this at Politico is very much related to the kind of content we are asked to produce. We cover daily policy and politics news. So as reporters, we are asked to look at every legislative proposal, every budget announcement, every roadmap or trade deal, and consider how different groups and subgroups are trying to influence the negotiations to put forward their own interests and how those tensions might be playing out during the negotiations. This could be the different DGs within the Commission that have their own portfolio of work and priorities, the different political parties in Parliament, and most importantly, the lobbies, both the industry groups and the NGOs who are very active in this town. So I work within a pretty extensive network of journalists, each with their own topic, beat, and expertise, and we try and leverage each other's expertise to go as far as possible into the specifics of these negotiations. And that's probably why you'll often see 2 or 3 bylines on our articles, actually. It's very much a question of working together. So that in this case, the climate and environmental topics are not only treated and talked about in the climate and environment or sustainability teams. So I work very closely with the energy and climate team, of course, but also the agricultural team, the mobility team, trade team, really any policy area where we're talking about a sector that is affected by the climate crisis and environmental crisis, that is contributing to those crises as well, and for whom the transition is a political priority for Europe. And I think this kind of reporting is really interesting and works well because it allows us to consider the transition, or what in Brussels we like to call the green agenda, as the backdrop of the story rather than the story itself. And it's really important to do that because I think it's part of our job to highlight how some of the solutions to climate change that are put forward by policymakers often either have a higher environmental cost than the problem they're supposed to fix, or they are contributing to fixing that problem, but they will have adverse economic, financial, and social impacts. And it's essential that the reader understands those nuances and those tensions. So one example in my reporting recently is covering the EU's proposal to ban the export of textile waste to developing countries. I think it would have been a mistake to only cover whether that ban has an environmental consequence, a positive environmental consequence on the impact, because it might reduce pollution abroad, without also explaining that there are huge consequences, economic and social, in the countries that import our textile waste as a source of raw material. And if that's the case, then we should probably think about the entire value chain of textile production, all the way to waste consumption and management, and consider the inequalities across that value chain. I can make another parallel with how the media reported on the pandemic. For the first couple of months, the story was how many deaths there were and how quickly the virus was spreading across countries. But as soon as the pandemic became our new normal, it made room for a lot of different stories and narratives, like how the real estate market was being affected specifically for office building space, how our healthcare systems were under severe stress because of years of underfunding in some countries, how social distancing was renegotiating human relationships, for example. And again, as soon as we understood the pandemic as the context, because it was normal life, then we were able to cover more nuanced stories. And I think that's what we need to do with the climate and planetary crises generally. Of course, that's a lot easier said than done, so I wanted to share with you a few of the struggles I'm facing at work, specifically related to the blind spots I have as a reporter, which are related to the fact that I'm a news reporter, and therefore I think about my articles in a very short-term lens. We're often stuck under very tight deadlines, often daily deadlines, and what that means is that it's very easy to fall into the trap of always speaking with the same people, often the people that make themselves available to the press, and therefore are available to share their interests more than others. And I see that especially with NGOs and green groups, some of whom have really figured out the best way to put forward their message, and who come to me with stories and tell me what I should be looking at and which scandals I should be uncovering. And so sometimes when you're thinking about the report that you have to give at the end of the day, it's very difficult to allow or allocate time to go and find the people that we're not speaking to, and to go and think about these broader implications. The other issue with this short-termism within news reporting is that we also don't always leave room in our articles for the long-term impacts of whatever topic and policy we're treating. So that's definitely something that I struggle with. I don't actually have a magic solution on that one. I think it's very, very difficult to find the space to integrate these very complex long-term implications of the climate crisis and the challenges that we face. But one way of doing it is to bring in the statistical expertise in the articles that we write. So a recent story that maybe some of you in Brussels might have heard about is how the EU decided to start the administrative process to downgrade the conservation status of the wolf because of increased livestock attacks. And those reports, those articles that treated that topic, a lot of them, maybe rightfully so, focused on how difficult it is for farmers to see their livelihoods affected by higher wolf attacks and an increased number of wolf attacks, and that perhaps allowing them to shoot down a wolf was a practical and efficient solution. But not a lot of those articles highlight the fact that, statistically speaking, long-term exposure to pesticide is a higher risk for farmers and livestock than wolf attacks, for example. And yet, it was easier to portray the wolf as the issue for readers. So I think we need to reconsider when we're talking about daily news to maybe try and avoid the sensational angle, or if we're trying to put forward this sensational angle, remember also the statistical background to allow readers to think more critically about these topics. And my final point, and I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here with all these reporters in the room, but we can't really do this transversal climate reporting without newsrooms investing in their reporters. So if there are any editors and managers listening, please hire reporters with different academic backgrounds. Hire reporters that maybe have worked in a sector different to the press before joining the press and that can bring their own expertise. Hire reporters that have not gone to journalism school and have academic backgrounds that could provide this expertise that we lack, and invest in training as well and linguistic skills, because we can't really cover the local angle without people that are embedded in those contexts and that understand the people, their culture, their history, and speak their language. And I will leave it there. Thank you for listening.
Fantastic, thank you very much. I think that's a really interesting sort of juxtaposition of positions. Let me just abuse my position by asking you a first question, both of you. We've seen across Europe a rise of right-wing populist parties, part of whose, I mean, who quite largely identify themselves as being anti-immigration, but also a kind of defence of individual liberties, as they would put it, often in opposition to environmental initiatives. I want to drive my old petrol car. I want to have a regular fire in my grate. I want to cover my fields with nitrogen and shoot the wolves. How great is the risk that the common issues of environment become associated with parties who find themselves in opposition to this rising tide that we see across Europe? Does that make sense as a question?
Of course. Personally, I link what is happening right now in Europe precisely to the decrease of the energy supply that has begun in 2007 in Europe, and which is something that we have not desired. Actually, in 2007, there has been no structural change in climate policies. Nothing special happened that year. What happened at that time is the conjunction of the peak of the North Sea production in gas, the peak in the coal production in Europe in the 1980s, and the peak of the conventional oil production in the world in 2008. And the conjunction of these three factors led to a decline of the fossil fuel supply in Europe, because we import half of our coal. In the European Union, the political European Union, we today import half of our coal, 96 or 97% of our oil, and 75% of our gas. As I've said before, if you have a decreasing energy supply, you have a decreasing active fleet of machines, therefore you have a decreasing physical economy, and therefore the system is put under stress. And if the system is already put under stress, people do not want additional stresses that would come from things that we would inflict ourselves on top of what is already happening. So the green movements generally lack the economic understanding of our society. And on top of that, they generally offer a bundle. So if you choose the environment, on top of that, you also have to choose a certain vision of fiscal of taxes, a certain vision of gender equality, a certain vision, etc. I don't say that it's good or bad. I just say that it comes in a bundle, and if you choose one, you choose the whole lot, which part of the population doesn't want. Which is a fact. And part of the population also doesn't want additional, I would say, restrictions on top of difficulties that begin to arise for other reasons. Not understanding that these difficulties arise anyway and that they will continue and increase, actually. So my belief is that the decrease of the energy supply in Europe is written in physics. It's going to continue. So things are going to be increasingly economically difficult. That's one of the things that today is not reported in the press. The link between the physical world and the economy is not in the press today. Economic journalists, most of them don't understand that. Environmental journalists don't understand that consuming less is producing less and basically managing an economic system which is contracting, which brings plenty of difficulties. What do we do with the debt? What do we do with the federal budget? Plenty of things like that, which are practical issues. And so people, if we want people to accept the idea that we will do more on the environment, we have to bring hope. And hope cannot be only restrictions. Cannot be that. Hope comes with jobs, comes with projects, comes with security, comes with plenty of things that are, I would say, usual to all of us. I mean, that's what drives us as well as the rest of the population. Comes with love, comes with solidarity. I mean, comes with plenty of things. And so today the challenge is to frame positive projects in a world of increasingly limited resources, which is a challenge, which is very difficult, which is something that we do not devote enough time on. Yesterday evening, I was giving a talk, and my point was to say that the Green Deal tries to combine things that will not happen together, namely growth and becoming green. Either we will have growth, if we can, physically, which is not certain. My belief is that we will not. And then we will not be green. Or we will be green and we won't have growth. But we have to choose. Actually, today, history is choosing for us no growth and a decrease of the emissions, but it's not something that we are really managing, basically. So that's the point. And you will not bring these people back on the ground of explaining that the science is sound. They don't care about the science, basically. They care about their own fears. And rejecting the science is basically a way to reject the idea of an additional burden. It's not the science that they are rejecting, basically. It's not something else. And this won't be fought either by naming and shaming the leaders of the populist parties. It doesn't work. I mean, in France, we've been doing that for 40 years. It doesn't work. For 40 years, we've been saying Marine Le Pen, boo-hoo-hoo. At every election, she's collecting more votes than during the previous one. I mean, it doesn't work. What is going to work is to be able to offer positive projects that reconcile the opposites, which is very hard, but it's the only way out.
Okay, Marianne?
Yeah, I totally agree, but I would also add to that that as reporters we have an important job, which is to fact check. And when green politicians propose policies or political directions for their country or for Europe, then it's our job to pinpoint where those policies are going to take us and where those contradictions are and what the economic and social implications are. And in the same way, when you're looking at what the populist politicians are proposing, then it's also our job to fact check whether it's feasible, what the financial costs are going to be, what the economic implications are going to be, and so on. And so, for example, during the European Union elections, a lot of the populist MEPs within various parties across Europe were saying that a core objective of theirs was to overturn the Green Deal, to take down some of the policies. And we asked them what that meant. We asked them which policies. We asked them, how do you take down a law that has been entrenched into the European Union, and they didn't have that many specific answers to give us. So I also think it's also not falling into this trap of always saying that the populists are anti-green and the green don't understand economy, and actually ask them what their projects are and look at whether they're feasible, and if they are feasible, what the consequences are going to be across different policy areas, including economic and social and environmental.
Thank you.